Hello and welcome to the great telco debate of 2021. For the second year running, we're staging the event online as travel restrictions and the escalating COVID situation simply make an in-person conference no longer viable. But fear not, we've got quite a few programs and online broadcasts under our belt since the start of this outbreak, 500 and counting, I believe, so we're up for this latest challenge. Now, our debates will be broadcast live over 3 consecutive days. That's 2 debates per day, and you can see the full schedule of debates right here. And there's more details on the TelecomTV website. This is our second debate today and covers private 5G. Earlier, we held our debate on open telco infra, and if you missed that, don't worry, it's going to be available very soon for on-demand viewing, probably by the end of this show. And just as we would have done in person at our London event, each 45-minute debate will feature a mix of expert witness statements from our invited guests, an accompanying motion that we want you to vote on, and a Q&A discussion with questions from our audience. The only difference is that we're online. But joining me for today's debate is my colleague Ray Lemaitre, Editorial Director at TelecomTV. Ray, as we said in our first debate today, this has always been an open forum on the future of telecoms with plenty of audience interaction, and I expect private 5G will generate some interesting online questions.
Absolutely, Guy. This is one of the hottest topics in the industry right now, and we already have questions in from the audience. But if you want your question to be put to today's experts, then please get them in as quickly as possible, as we are taking these questions on a first come, first served basis. So don't delay.
No delays. Get your questions in as soon as you can and use the form we provide on the website. Now, it wouldn't be the great telco debate without Chris Lewis and Graham Wild. And as they have done ever since the very first event, back in the dawn of time, the two of them have written the all-important motions for the debates, and it's these motions we want you to vote on.
Yep, and earlier this week, Chris and Graham got together to decide who would advocate in favour of the motion and who against.
We chose this motion around private 5G because there's been so much discussed in the industry, so much emphasis put upon how the enterprise market is going to be the growth engine for the telecoms of the future. But we wanted to put it into context and make people think about how the private 5G fits into the broader enterprise and industrial markets. I'm speaking for this motion because I believe it's important to put the private 5G delivery in the context of what businesses are trying to do. The telecom industry and all the suppliers have got very excited about the possibilities that 5G and private 5G bring to the enterprise market. But when talking to the enterprises and putting it into the context of what they're trying to achieve as manufacturing or the campus space or whatever, is really important to understand that yes, connectivity is an underlying essential component, but it is a component. And the way the business flows work, the way the integration works, the way the applications work, and ultimately the way revenue flows through those organizations is what is most important. So connectivity is a relatively minor element in delivering these services for the future of the enterprise.
So I'm speaking against this motion. By the way, we tossed a coin for me to speak against the motion. So it's not purely out of self-interest that I'm speaking against the motion. But I do think that private 5G actually represents an enormous opportunity for telcos to deliver the kinds of mission-critical, reliable services that they're used to delivering on a national scale, but on a campus scale for ports, airports, factories, and so on. And we're already seeing the likes of Verizon, BT, Hutchison Group as well, delivering these kinds of services and bringing fantastic competitive advantage to their customers. So I'm against the motion.
Chris and Graham there explaining the motion. Private 5G is a minority component of Industry 4.0 and offers limited opportunities for CSPs. And as you heard, they gave their arguments for and against. And later in the show, we'll see exactly how you voted. As regular Great Telco Debate attendees know, we first hear a range of views and opinions, our expert witness statements, and these will then lead into our Q&A discussion with Ray. So let's now go and meet our special guests. Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining us for the great telco debate. It's time now for our opening comments, and as always, we are imposing a strict time limit, 3 minutes max. You can go less, 3 minutes max for each of our expert witness statements. So let's begin, and let me first introduce Francesca. And Francesca Saravalli is the Emerging Technology Director at Colt Technology. Francesca, good to see you again on the programme. Can we have your expert witness statement, please, on private 5G?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for inviting me here. So I'm against the motion. I believe that there is a great opportunity for a service provider. I agree that 5G is only a component of the entire stack. As 5G becomes a data generation platform for enterprise to really help their data-driven strategy, we still need, an IoT platform to manage those data, an AI platform to extrapolate insights, and all sorts of verticalized application, AR and VR application. And I think it's fair to assume that the biggest revenue will be from the application. But, there is still a great opportunity on the connectivity side with some dependency. It really depends on how far service providers are in their network transformation process, whether the network is it's 5G ready, it's service driven, they have implemented SDN and NAV capability to enable network resources and network function to be provisioned on demand and deliver dynamic SLA. It depends whether they have innovative partner program to go towards those solution business model. But it also depends on their strategy, on their business positioning view and strategy, whether they want to play simply on the connectivity side, position their edge-centric network to really enable flexible architecture, all sorts of hosting capability model, and distributed architecture as well, and flexible topology. Or whether they want to play on the platform layer, driving synergy with the likes of hyperscaler, as we did with IBM, hosting on our edge capability, network edge, cloud software-driven distributed cloud platform, and enable enterprise to access cloud services, whether it's DevOps environment, AI and data management pipeline, and all their marketplace. Or they can, go towards a solution business model, working with the driving operational, technical, and business synergy with the entire technology player in the ICT stack, but with SI as well to innovate the go-to-market model, because, SIs are the key one that can really drive the conversation with the industry verticals, and then translate business architecture and operational architecture into the right technical architecture. And it's important, really, in this case, to have a business-led innovation process to enable to co-create and co-innovate with the broader partner ecosystem.
Thank you very much, Francesca. As you say, very much on a per telco basis, depends where they are on their transformation journey and also their strategy. Great. Well, next I'd like to introduce Phil Skipper, who is Head of IoT Business Development at Vodafone Business. Phil, very good to see you again. Can we please have your expert witness statement?
Of course. Now, I'm a CSP, so I need to tell you why our options are not limited. So let me start off. IoT and mobile private networks, they're just different ways of delivering connectivity. And the same thing is true in IoT. Connectivity is a small part of the component, but it doesn't stop CSPs generating massive opportunities. Based just on connectivity, we've built a business of 130 million connections from scratch. The second point is the value actually isn't in the connectivity anyway, it's in the operational service. So if you look at what we're doing with Industry 4.0 and all the clever VR and AR and digital twins and digital threads, they all rely on connectivity. So you have to stop treating private networks as a technology because they're an operational asset. It's something that organizations rely on to deliver their manufacturing output. But interestingly, it becomes even more critical because connectivity in private 5G networks becomes as critical as electricity. If the power goes off, the factory stops. If the connectivity goes off, the factory stops. So the opportunity for CSPs is far beyond connectivity. It's in managing these operational networks, not just building them, that's relatively straightforward. It's running them for the next 5-10 years in a complex environment where things are changing. And our customers like Ford, they see this. They can develop some quite fantastic processes for manufacturing and inspection, but when they move it up into their manufacturing plant, it becomes a very different operating environment. And I think CSPs are well placed because their expertise is in managing these networks. I think the final point is Industry 4.0, particularly, is a process, not a place. And everyone thinks about 5G private networks as, we've got to put it within the four walls of the factory. We've got to do connectivity and coverage. That's not the case, because Industry 4.0 is as much about connecting the ecosystem together, the supply chain. And I think that's where there's a lot of value for the telco, because we can operate private networks over both public slices as well as on-site. So that's a huge opportunity for telcos going forwards. With people like UKPN, we're already doing it to create distributed smart grid. We also shouldn't forget that factories no longer produce finished products. They produce products which are configured in the hands of the customer. So that's another place where private 5G takes the factory to the field. So look, I understand the discussion. It's never stopped us before, and it won't stop us now with mobile private networks.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Phil, for that opening statement, and 3 great points there you raised. Right, let me now introduce our next guests. Catherine. Catherine Gull is a consultant for Cellnex and also a member of the UK 5G Advisory Board. Catherine, very good to see you on the programme. First time on the Great Telco Debate. Catherine, could we have your expert witness statement, please?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me. So I think private 5G is a core component of Industry 4.0. Just like Phil said, it is like the electricity that comes into the room. Without electricity, we don't get to do anything else. So I think there are 3 key components, and I'm going to break it down a little bit more granularly, that are the reason why private 5G is important to Industry 4.0. First, it's about data collection. And without having data collection and being able to collect the data from the source and put it into an AI or machine learning to make some real-time decisions, without private 5G or some mechanism, including private 5G, you can't actually connect the data source with the data AI, machine learning, etc. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a data analytics company that said, everybody wants my service, but how do we get the data from point A to point B and get it there reliably? So the second reason is because private networks can be built reliably and very much custom tailored to how a private network or an enterprise need them. The connectivity can be in the corners that they need. It can be outside, inside, exactly where they need it in order to be gathering all of that data. And also, the third reason is latency. And now latency is, it's one of those things. What does that really mean? But reliable latency drives a lot of those things that Industry 4.0 relies on, such as the AGVs, and robotics that really are going to make a big difference in Industry 4.0. Now, the question was, what's in it for the CSPs? Is it a limited opportunity for CSPs? And I would say it depends on how the CSP looks at their business. The opportunity is there to custom tailor and to really get close to your customer. It is one of the few telco products that I've ever seen where you really become a partner with your customer in order to deliver some extraordinary change. Thanks so much.
No, thank you, Catherine, for that opening statement and underlying the importance of private 5G to Industry 4.0. Our next guest joining us live today on the Great Telco Debate is Richard Band, who is Head of Mobile Core and 5G with the Communications Technology Group at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. Richard, good to see you again. And can we now have your expert witness statement, please?
Certainly, my pleasure. Well, first on the first part, is connectivity a minority component? I think yes, it is a minority component. I think private 5G is not the reason why people are buying. People are buying because they have certain needs, things they need to accomplish, automation, more insights that are driven by the devices and the data that they have at the edge. And they may have an existing connectivity solution that in certain circumstances is not matching their needs, be it coverage, be it reliability, bandwidth. But ultimately, people are not buying connectivity. They're buying the business outcomes, and connectivity is just a component that's contributing to it. Doesn't mean that's a small opportunity for us, but we need to be cognizant of the fact that we're just an enabling element into a bigger business outcome. And this, I think, is also the piece where, and I want to be a bit more controversial than the other speakers, where I think the CSPs have reasons to worry. I think so far CSPs have done a good job of selling connectivity. But when I look at 5G and the way that they've introduced 5G, for the most part, I see CSPs doing business as usual. And I truly believe that they need to change. I think that in order to be successful with private networking, there is a need to have a bigger industry vertical knowledge. And that industry vertical knowledge, to some degree, they may acquire themselves, but for the most part will require the CSPs to open up and build more of an ecosystem of partners with whom they will do co-development of the solutions. And that requires a different way of looking at the technology and looking at the suppliers and partners they're working with. I think this is a big challenge and is still a lot of transformation to be done by the CSPs. The other thing that we see is that a certain number of countries, spectrum is being opened up. New actors are coming into the game. I do believe that that is not necessarily the end of the CSP position in this market. I do believe that the CSPs have assets to play. Phil mentioned the operational aspect. I do believe that the majority of enterprise will prefer to have a managed service, but it won't automatically be the CSP. They do not necessarily have the hook of the spectrum, and others will come in and step up and propose to be a managed service provider. And if they're better at combining those capabilities with the industry vertical knowledge, there is a real risk for the CSP. So I think there's an opportunity, there's a significant opportunity, but I do believe the CSPs have to up their game in order to be successful.
Thank you very much, Richard. Always good to get the contrasting views or range of views. That's what makes Great Telco Debate so special. Thanks for that sort of word of caution there to CSPs. Our next guest is Paul Adams. Paul is Marketing Director for Nokia Europe. Paul, great to see you again. And can we now have your expert witness statement, please?
At the risk of doing a bit of a 90s throwback, which is probably dating me a little bit, there's a great Dilbert cartoon which talks about change for the sake of promotion. You will appear to be a visionary planner when you take a new role if you centralize everything that was decentralized and centralize everything and decentralize everything that was centralized. This is the way to be seen as a management genius. So we've all seen this cycle of centralization and decentralization many times, those of us who've been in the industry a long time. And outsourcing is not dissimilar in this regard, I would say. And this decision and this discussion could be said to be very much about that in some ways. In the outsourcing cycle, CSPs have always had a role to play. We only need to look at the rise and the fall of the big outsourcing companies, or actually the rise and the fall of the big CSP outsourcing divisions as well over many years. Some are still with us, of course, and some have fallen by the wayside. Clearly, in private 5G, reserved 5G spectrum does allow enterprises to build their own networks, to build their own capabilities. But what is often not considered is the ongoing management of these networks. That is important. 5G is not as simple as Wi-Fi. 5G is not another G, and it's a complicated and specialist activity to manage a network like a 5G network. the value is very often in the service that's being delivered. There is an appetite from CSPs to partner, and they add a lot of value. You've only got to look at the partnership arrangement or the partnership that was announced relatively recently between ourselves and on Verizon and Verizon on private wireless, and we've had some very notable they've had some very notable and interesting successes. We, as Nokia, obviously, we have a foot in both camps because we serve enterprises and we serve CSPs. And some enterprises can, of course, build these networks themselves. But I think what we need to consider is that it's horses for courses. And I think it depends what is the best solution for the enterprise at any one time.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul. As you say, it's horses for courses. And also, thanks for bringing up Dilbert, because we can still, even though it's a 90s reference, we can still learn a lot from Dilbert's management techniques. And it's good to have Dilbert on the Great Telco Debate. Now, I'd like to introduce our final guest for our private 5G debate, Lorcan Burke. Lorcan is Director for RAN at VMware. And Lorcan, this is your first time on the Great Telco Debate, so welcome. And can we have your expert witness statement, please?
Sure, thanks for that. Yeah, so I think we, from a VMware perspective, we have quite a lot of footprint in a lot of enterprises and supporting a lot of their digital transformation journeys. So whether it's app modernization or moving things to the cloud or from the cloud, very involved in a lot of those conversations. And the points about collecting data, analyzing data, accelerating that workload, a lot of that debate going on. And for the most part, when we get asked quite a bit around 5G and private networks inside lots of different verticals, whether it's manufacturing or large campus deployments or other industrial verticals like healthcare. And for the most part, I think the customers we're talking to are quite confused. Right? It's 5G's a new set of interesting words to be talking about. Why is it different to Wi-Fi? What's the security implications? Why does it look so expensive? Why can't I just use 2G or 4G for some of these connections? That comes up pretty consistently. But what is constant is that the connectivity required in most of these verticals is critical. So we've got to be able to connect things to create data, collect, correlate, and do something useful with that. And it needs to be reliable and performant. And as to Catherine's point, latency is important. People have a lot of robotics in factories at the moment, as an example, where the controller is sat underneath the robotic arm and it needs to get moved to a comms cabinet. And that does need something reliable and predictable in how it performs latency. So we've been working through a bunch of those things with people, figuring out different solution sets and how do we leverage our edge infrastructure. But for the most part, the questions around how does it work in relation to Wi-Fi, how does it work in relation to 2G for remote connectivity, what's the difference with 4G, those questions come up all the time. And particularly for manufacturing, unless we can scale it down towards the SME, not just the large kind of hero sites, I don't think we'll really achieve the industrial change that's required there. Now, one of the advantages particularly for telcos or CSPs in that space is that they're usually very strong as system integrators to SME and to very large corporates and government. So there is a significant opportunity in connectivity in these environments, and 5G will play its role over time.
Great, thank you very much, Lorcan, and interesting to hear about customer confusion and obviously all the questions that enterprise customers are still asking, to be expected, I guess. And thank you everyone for your opening statements. Right, you've heard from our expert witnesses. Now it's time to challenge them. So please send us your questions. Don't delay. We'll get through as many as we can. Akira Tada of SoftBank wasn't able to make it to this live show, but he still wanted to contribute.
Yes, I spoke with Akira earlier and asked him if mobile network operators play a big role in the provision and operation of 5G private networks.
There is no question about that. The mobile operators continue to play a big role, whatever it is, public one or private one. This is too new for enterprise customers to manage mobile network services. Instead of relying on mobile network operators. And also, the enterprise customers doesn't have know-how to manage network systems with high reliability. And so, from a network operator's perspective, this gives us a lot of option to find a best mix of services to enterprise customers. So, which could create more revenue opportunities.
Okay, Al, thanks to Akira for his contribution from Japan to the great telco debate.
Yes, indeed. And Ray, we've had a range of views from our expert witnesses, and we've given our audience plenty of time to send in their questions. Any initial thoughts or questions from you?
Well, none from me, because we've got way too many from our audience today, and they've clearly been reacting to some of the things that our expert witnesses have had to say. So let's get straight into the questions from our audience. And the first one is related to the subject of security, which cropped up a few times in the witness statements. And the question is whether there are any particular security concerns, including national security concerns, when it comes to the building and running of private 5G networks. Are there any regulatory concerns, and does this make it more suitable for mobile network operators to be running private 5G networks as a result? Would anybody like to come in and comment or give an answer to that question? Okay, Francesca, thank you.
Thank you, Ray. So yeah, security is first and foremost. It's very important, and I will give an answer with two hats. First, the cold hat. What we're seeing is that it's really important that connectivity and security comes together, and the security services need to go beyond encryption, beyond managed firewall, but also being able, as part of the telco cloud vision, to enable the enterprise to provision security services fully decentralized or at the network edge, if, for example, they want an harmonized security posture across different sites. The other answer that I want to give is with the hat of a vice chairman of UK 5G Security Group, which was created 2 years ago by UK 5G. And the reason why it was created is because DCMS, they run a threat landscape, and they have identified some security gaps. So what we want to do is to leverage those test beds that have been deployed and funded by the government around the UK to be able to close those gaps, but also to be able to identify best practice per use case, because we're going to have, to see a trends and need of synergy between IT security and OT security. So it's really important to have a use case driven approach, but also to drive an ecosystem development to enable an holistic security framework, because we don't just need secure connectivity, but we also need a secure platform and secure application and secure device.
Now, that's what I called an expert witness response there. Thank you very much, Francesca. Would anybody else like to come in on this question? If not, yes, so Lorcan.
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, I've been involved in a couple of conversations with enterprise customers trying to buy private 5G systems, which have ended up being a bit too much of a black box. So there's a debate around making these systems simple, but how do you make it open enough that the security assessment can be done by the enterprise side of the business? So we do, we end up in a lot of those conversations where we're trusted to run a lot of workload or prevent data center, the cloud security between different parts of the data center infrastructure, and often there's a little bit of a black box approach coming from some of the telcos pitching private 5G, which probably needs to be a little bit more open and needs to be a bit more potentially SI driven around how that gets engaged.
Okay, interesting. Thanks very much, Lorcan. So I'm going to move on to the next audience question now, because they are coming in thick and fast. This next question does relate again to a couple of the comments made during our expert witness statements. And the question is, what role can CSPs really play in private 5G? Can they be the lead in any consortia? Do they have to be part of a consortium to deliver these? And do the CSPs have enough detailed knowledge about the enterprise needs to be able to be the lead in a private 5G contract. So would anybody like to address that about the suitability of a telco to be the lead player? Yes, Phil, not surprised. Do you want to come in there? Let's come to you first.
Okay, so as a CSP, I think I can sort of answer that, is that it depends on the size of the project, clearly. But I think from the connectivity aspect, if somebody is building an infrastructure, and I think that's what we're after. If somebody wants to build an infrastructure and have it operated on which they can put these applications, then the CSP is ideally placed to do it. I think the other thing we need to be well aware of is that no one is going to be expert in somebody else's business. So to sort of think that a telco or an SI or something could be as expert as your customer in what they make is probably going to be very difficult to realize. So I think it's all about finding where your partners create most value. And I think, yes, certainly we prime many of our contracts today. We also are part of large consortiums. But I think it's this true question about what is the outcome, what is the operational solution you're looking for, rather than going back over the what does the technology look like? So I think the answer is yes, and it very much depends on the project.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We'll come to Richard next, and then we'll come to Catherine. So Richard.
Well, I challenged a little bit on this in my initial response. I think the answer is that there's no such thing as DCSP. I'm seeing very different strategies from different customers. I see some customers making very deliberate steps to build up an in-house system integration capability precisely to work with customers to understand their problem and understand how to apply the connectivity. But I also see them reaching out to other parties and work with them. And then whether they will lead or they will be a supporting role depends on the position that they're able to take in terms of the depth of knowledge and even the role of the way that the customers like to procure. Some customers have very close relationships with the telcos and like to work directly with them. In other cases, they are much more intimate with a system integrator, and the system integrator may be the right role. What I think is important is to be cognizant of the fact, again, that the end customer doesn't care about connectivity per se. The customer requires something else. And for each industry vertical, the CSP must have a strategy how to meet that need, whether that's by developing the competencies in-house or partnering externally, but must be super clear on where they want to play and how they want to engage with their ecosystem in order to meet those needs.
Okay, thank you, Richard. All great points there. And Catherine, let's come to you next on this.
So in a way, I'm going to violently agree with both parties, even though they're kind of coming from two different perspectives. I think the CSP or the SI or the provider of the private wireless network has to understand what the requirements are. They don't have to be intimate with the requirements. They have to understand the implications around these requirements. Because in essence, I think someone said earlier, if that network doesn't work, if the electricity doesn't come in, I think, Phil, you said that, then nothing else works. So they have to be in lockstep. Now, the question of whether the CSP should lead, whether the SI should lead, I think it's not even, in a way, it's not even worth debating, because you need to, this Industry 4.0 is an iterative process. It will be brought in for one or two applications, and then things will get built on it. So if a company is saying, I'm going to bite the entire piece of cake, I'm going to eat the whole cake at once, then you probably need a consortium led by somebody who actually understands the Industry 4.0 much better than the CSP. But really what we're saying is companies are not taking the whole cake, they're taking it slice by slice.
Okay, yeah, excellent point. I think the key takeaway here is that clear communication between all parties is absolutely vital in the run-up and planning to these private 5G networks. Okay, let's come to the next audience question here. And this is about whether there are any particular size metrics here for private 5G networks. I mean, the question is private 5G only viable for large campus or stadium deployments, or is this something that could also be suitable for much smaller deployments? Is there anybody that wants to come in? And yes, Catherine, let's come to you first.
Great. So I believe that size, yes, it does matter because it's about cost. But with private 5G, it's about the criticality of the data and the information that's coming across that private 5G that really drives the decision. So it doesn't have to be a stadium, it doesn't have to be a port or an airport, but it has to be so critical, that data, that you need the private 5G.
Okay, great. Thank you, Catherine. Francesca, we'll come to you next and then to Phil.
Yeah, I think there is no limits in terms of sites, thanks to, softwareization, new cloud native player. You can now create a different stack depending on the size of the deployment, depending on the use case. So we're seeing a lot of innovation, not only from a technology side, but also from the deployment side. So I think it's more of a use case discussion rather than deployment.
Okay, fantastic point. And Phil?
And I think I'll echo both of those as well. I think the other point to bear in mind is that we shouldn't just consider private 5G as something which is a bunch of hardware on a site with a radio network and one application. We also have to look a little bit to the future around slices on public networks, which of course will give similar, if not the same capability, which is going to be accessible to much smaller organizations that don't have the hardware overhead, as well as the virtualization. I think it will make it much more accessible to smaller organizations that need the capability of 5G private networks.
Thanks very much, Phil. Okay, I think we're getting, in the interest of time, we're going to move on to the next question. And this is really about, and I think this comes back to some of the points made during the expert witness statements. What is so special about private 5G that it needs a telco to be involved? The person asking this question says that large enterprises in particular are already quite well versed in running their own communications and IT networks. So why would it be any different for private 5G? Would anybody like to start the response to that question? Any takers? Richard, yep, let's come to you first.
Oh, I think, yes, there will be enterprise that will be happy and will be tech savvy enough and may have sufficient unique requirements that they are willing to invest into the capabilities to run the network by themselves. But I think it's going to be a minority of the enterprises. In the end, this is not core to their business. They're in a different business. They're in business of manufacturing. They're in business of healthcare. They're in business of logistics. So unless you can really drive differentiation on the connectivity level to help your business, I would assume that most customers prefer to make somebody else responsible for managing that infrastructure. And again, I made this statement in the beginning. This is where I think, and Phil also was indicating this is where I think the CSPs have the card to play. We tend to think about the spectrum, and of course the spectrum is important, but I think the real important piece here is that they have an ability to run networks over time at scale, and this is a capacity that most customers don't want to invest in, a capability they don't want to invest in. So yeah, there will be some that do it by themselves. There will be some that will ask system integrators or even hyperscalers to do it for them. But there's certainly a market for CSPs to provide these services.
Okay, great. Thank you, Richard. Yes, Francesca.
Yeah, just to second what Richard says, I think, yes, there are in the market now deployment model and as well as solutions that offer 5G as a service. There are many automation and orchestration tools available, but this is not about functional requirement. It's about the non-functional requirement, the security, the resilience, the availability, driving application performance, where a service provider can make a difference.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question from the audience, and they are still coming in quick and fast here. So this question is I guess you might say it's a little bit off topic, but this has actually cropped up in more than one question now. So I'm going to put this one to the panel. Is there a view on where Wi-Fi 6 would make more sense in a private network than 5G? Or should these technologies be deployed and be seen to be working together? Are they complementary? So this has definitely cropped up in some of our other debates here as well. So Lorcan, I think we'll come to you first. And I saw Richard with your hand up as well there.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. I think to Catherine's point, the criticality is part of it. If you want really latency sensitive, constrained bandwidth applications, you're going to have to lean a little bit towards the unmanaged private 4G or 5G service. But for most people, the evolution of Wi-Fi 6 and open Wi-Fi is pretty good, and it's pretty cheap for 80% of the applications. So some of the problems I think we have with current technology cost or even service cost around private 5G is it can be between 2 and 5 times the visible price of an equivalent Wi-Fi service. So as we converge those, I think it becomes that they can coexist quite nicely. But until then, we're forcing a lot of enterprise customers to try and make some decisions based on the critical nature of their connectivity, and as such, we limit the market we can address with 5G.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Lorcan. And Richard, I saw that you wanted to come in on this Wi-Fi 6 question as well.
Yeah, for me, it's obvious that it will be a coexistence between 5G and Wi-Fi 6, or even previous generations. I mean, in an enterprise context, I think the starting position today is Wi-Fi. There's an ecosystem of devices, there's processes, there's investment in infrastructure and skills and capabilities. And even if there are use cases that are triggering the need for different connectivity, again, because of coverage, because of reliability, because of bandwidth, I do not believe that it will be sweeping away the existing infrastructure. There will be a need to coexist. Very similar, I would say, in the way that in a public 5G, coexistence of 4G and 5G is a critical capability. I believe coexistence of Wi-Fi and 5G is going to be critical in the enterprise space.
Great, Richard, thanks very much. And Francesca, we'll come to you briefly, and then I think we have time for one more audience question on today's program. So Francesca.
Yeah, I'll be short. Just to say that to me there should be coexistence. Obviously, when there are applications that need deterministic performance as well as real low latency, then I think it's a 5G play. But I think there are niche applications as well for Wi-Fi. Eventually, I would like to see what in the market also some capability that 3GPP has already standardized, where you can have interrupt traffic steering depending on the type of use case. So hopefully in the future we will be able to do this segmentation of traffic and traffic management depending on the use case.
Thank you, Francesca. Okay, and I think we do have time for one more question today. So this question is, could we expect to see a one-stop shop managed private cellular network that lets you start small and scale up as you need along the lines of an AWS private 5G? Is that the kind of thing we can expect to see out there in the market eventually and available to all sizes of enterprise? Would anybody like to come in on this? Yes, Catherine, we'll come to you first and then to Phil.
In a way, it's already there because you can define how you want to start, how you want to scale up. One benefit to private 5G is you work with your CSP or your provider in defining what you need, when you need it, where you need it, how you need it. So it is easy to start small. So yes, it's here already.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. And Phil.
And I think I agree with Catherine. So I think it's already there, and I think the scaling of it, when you think about it, is not just scaling within the four walls of the factory, but how do you scale out to your customer and to your supply chain. So I think, as Catherine says, we're sort of already there. Many of our customers start small with one process. They move the 5G network into their factory, and then they can actually start to add another process and another process and another process. So it's already well set up to scale, both in terms of not only the number of connections, but of course the number of applications or manufacturing processes that can coexist on the network. So I think we're there already.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Well, the red light is flashing in the corner of our virtual studio, and it's unfortunately we are out of time. The questions are still coming in. Sorry to those people that sent them in towards the end of the program. We'll try to get to them another time. But at this point, I'll hand back over to Guy.
Yes, thank you, Ray. We do need to bring our discussion to a close, which means that it's almost time to tally the audience votes. And to remind you, here is the motion that we have asked you to vote on. Private 5G is a minority component of Industry 4.0 and offers limited opportunities for CSPs. But before we reveal the results, let's first see which way our guests will vote, either for or against. So, look, you've all heard the motion, so let's have a show of hands, please, right? All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hands now. And I'll do a count. One, going once, going twice, gone. All those against the motion, raise your hands now. 1, 2, 3, 2. Oh, 3 versus 1. Oh, 4 versus 1, and Richard's wavering. Richard, you can't sit on the fence. Go on, 4 against. Oh, you're not going to influence it. It's against. Richard, you've lost anyway. The against has got it. Definitely got it. Thanks, everybody. Now let's see how this compares with our online viewer vote. Our expert witnesses voted just about against the motion, but what did you decide? Well, our voting is now closed, and here are the final numbers. Well, there you go. Exactly the same as our experts. The vote went against. Ray, are you surprised, or did you really expect this result?
Not a massive surprise. And I think given what we've heard today, and I think what we've been hearing from the market recently, not a massive surprise. But, great to see that a lot of people are voting and a lot of questions coming in today. Great interaction from our audience.
Yeah, there really has been fantastic interaction. Thanks so much, everyone. Well, this brings to an end our programme on private 5G, and Ray, will see you again for the next debate. However, before we go, a thank you to all of our sponsors for supporting this year's debate. They're on screen there now. Thank you very much for supporting everything we do at the Great Telco Debate. And a big thank you to all of our guests, our expert witnesses. You all did a great job today. Thank you all very much for joining us. A reminder that the Great Telco Debate continues. We'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. UK time for the next debate, which looks at the Green Network, and we follow that with the debate on the fibre gold rush. Please keep sending in your questions. We do try and get through as many as we possibly can. We've had so many questions. No need to wait for the show to begin. We really appreciate your contributions, so get them in now for tomorrow. For now, though, from all of the team here at TelecomTV and the Great Telco Debate, thank you for watching and goodbye.